Um, Before I put you under oath, just kind of a housekeeping. If you're going to talk, there's a button there. If you see the light turn on, that means your mic is on. Once you finish talking, you can press the button and it'll turn off. Another thing, please, if you have cell phones with you, I ask that you either turn it off or put it aside. The committee would appreciate it if there are no interruptions via the use of cell phones during the testimonies. So thank you for being here. Mr. Salas, can you please raise your right hand? I'm going to put you under oath. Do you swear or affirm under penalty of law that the testimony that you're about to give is the truth? Thank you. You can put down your right hand. Now for the record, can you please state your full name and your title and the agency you represent?
My name is Ramon Sablon Salas. I am the Director of Land Claims Division, but as of August 2nd, the Governor appointed me Acting Secretary of the Department of Public Lands.
Thank you, Mr. Salas. Before we begin the questioning, first I want to ask the witness, do you understand why you are asked to appear today? Thank you. You understand the article relevant to today's hearing is involves the sole source contract between the CNMI government and the power purchase agreement contractor Saipan Development LLC?
No, sir.
You didn't know that that's what you were here for? Can you please make sure the light is on before you speak?
Yes, sir.
Thank you. Can I just refer to you as Director? Mr. Salas, since you are the Acting Director? Or is it Secretary? I'm sorry. My apologies, Mr. Secretary. The members will be asking specific questions about the issue of any land lease related to Saipan Development LLC. I think a first question is there a land lease issued or signed for Saipan Development LLC?
Well, the answer is no, sir.
Thank you. There is no existing valid land lease agreement that was issued or signed by Public Lands to Saipan Development LLC.
There is no land lease signed.
There is no land lease. What about, is there an agreement to lease land? Please push that mic. When you see the light is on, you can talk. There you go. You can let go after you push it.
There is an option to lease.
Thank you. Now, just for the benefit of the members, can you tell us what is an option to lease? I don't know what kind of legal document that is.
It's an agreement to lease public land.
Would you like to clarify something further?
It's an option to lease, portion of public lands for development.
Now, if such an agreement were to be made to anyone, not necessarily Saipan, just so we understand what is an option to lease, that's an agreement that gives whoever the party is, I guess, that you would sign with, an agreement to lease a particular piece of land. Is that kind of what I'm hearing? Would the legal counsel like to clarify?
Thank you. An option to lease is just that. It's merely an option. So the land at issue here is just held for a certain amount of time. So a company can then progress and take measures so they don't have to worry about whether or not there's going to be land eventually. So it's just a hold on land. So further negotiations could potentially result in a lease. So the option is just holding the land for a certain amount of time until negotiations can take place, which would result ultimately in a lease.
Thank you. I certainly didn't know that, so thank you for that clarification. Now, who has the authority to sign on behalf of public land or the government this option to lease agreement?
It's the secretary.
And do you recall when this option to lease agreement was signed by the secretary?
August 3rd, 2012.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary. And Mr. Legal Counsel, you pointed out that if an agreement for an option to lease is signed, that it would be valid for a temporary period, a certain amount of time. What is that time normally?
Well, it really depends on the agreement. I don't think there's a normal time frame. It all depends. In this particular case, it's a 2-year hold.
Thank you for that clarification. So it varies case by case.
That's correct.
Thank you. Do you know where this particular property is that the option to lease is going to be or was executed for?
It's down at the lower base, the former DPW compound.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary. And just so we are clear, that former DPW compound, the title for that property is still held by DPL, or was it, I know that the law does allow DPL to, in some cases, transfer title of that property to other agencies, such as CUC, Public Works, or what. Is that title to that property still remain with DPL?
Yeah, public land has still the title to that property, Mr. Chairman. For your information, Mr. Chairman, I do have copy of the map for that particular lot down there.
Would you kindly submit that to the committee for part of our documents or records? I'm going to yield for now and allow other members to pose questions. I'm not sure, but I think Rep. Guerrero, did you raise your hand? Okay, I thought I saw your hand raised. Rep. Teputep? Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Secretary, for being here this morning, and your counsel, Mr. Michael Will. The option to lease agreement you mentioned is in lower base. Is that correct?
The properties are
The
down
properties in lower base. Is that where the present CUC power plant is?
north of that.
So perhaps if we can have Mr. Chairman, have the map maybe posted somewhere. So
Can we
we're talking about
have
the same thing with,
I wonder how we're going to do this. We can, BJ, are we able to, I don't know if that's big enough that you can open it up. Do we have?
or just
We do not.
post it up there, perhaps?
Maybe you can,
Or post it up here, much closer here.
okay. While they're posting it up, do any of the members have questions?
I have.
Please, you still have the floor.
How much is the, or what is the square, what's the square area, land size of this land that we are looking at for, as an option to lease? Are we looking at square meter, perhaps? Just roughly, it doesn't have to be accurate.
That's accurate.
Maybe we just look at the map and it might indicate the square meter. Is that around the public work area or north of the present power plant one is located?
You know, the old former DPW heavy equipment machine shop.
Yes. So that's about a little bit northeast of the present power plant located. Is that where the black, is that mark, or is that
Can I go up there, Mr. Chairman? And
yes, 206E0002? Is that the land?
okay, the land in question is 206E02 and 196E01.
What's the square meter?
The total square meters for 206E02 is 21,252, and for lot 196E01 is 11,144,
So that's about 32,000 square meter.
roughly.
And you're looking at 205E01, that's where the present power plant is. How much is that square meter?
It's 28,767 square meters.
So almost the same size, huh?
That is correct.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Secretary. I do have just a follow-up question on that. Certainly appreciate it's okay. Certainly appreciate you showing us the map. On the option to lease agreement, you have a process that we follow over any other existing land leases. Is that correct? Option for lease agreement. That's what we're talking about at this point. There is a process that public land follows. Is that correct? How do we come about to have any company that would come to DPL to acquire this one? What are the steps to acquire option to lease? In short, how do I get option to lease agreement from DPL?
It will just be reviewed by the Secretary and the Legal Counsel.
So any company can come into DPL and I present you my lease agreement, and then the department reviews my recommendation on kinds of stipulations in an option to lease the public land?
He's asking whether or not DPL would just consider an option to lease. It's a normal contract that's made every day. He's asking whether or not DPL would review any other option to lease.
Maybe let me rephrase.
Yeah.
So the option for lease agreement comes from DPL, is that correct?
That is correct.
And then if any interested party is interested to lease any property within the CNMI, I acquire that option to lease agreement from DPL, is that correct?
Yeah. We only deal with public land, sir, Mr. Chairman.
Yes, I'm asking, so any public land that any party is interested to lease, and then I go to DPO and request for that option to lease agreement.
Mr. Chairman, an option to lease is only a contract for a short period of time. It's not a lease.
Right. You mentioned that you hold this option to lease agreement for at least a couple of years. That's what the council mentioned earlier.
For this particular matter, yes, for 2 years.
So specifically then on these 2 lots north of the present location of the CUC Power Plant 1, you have an investor, you have a business who wants to lease this property, and that company is Saipan Development LLC.
Representative Tep, once he answers your question, may I interject? After he answers, before you go on to your next question.
Okay. Mr. Chairman, can you just, Congressman Tep, repeat your question again?
I'm just trying to understand the process and the step on how anyone, any company for that matter, will get the option lease agreement from DPL. What is the step to take those, or to acquire that? How do I get it? How do I get an option lease agreement from DPL public land?
Can I respond? Okay. So again, an options contract is just an option. Okay, and it's very common in business when a company is looking to either lease land or purchase land to at least hold that land, so then they can get all their other affairs together and see if they want to move forward with the venture. At least they have the land secured, and then a lease could be negotiated later on. It's just one step in the process, and it's very normal, and it happens all the time in business and with land transactions.
Thank you. I think that's clear. So is there a price to that, or do I pay a fee if I'm going to require or request an option lease agreement from DPL?
There's almost always consideration for an option. In fact, I think it's required in order to be a valid contract.
What are the considerations, at least in this case?
It's usually very nominal. In this case, I think it was $100. It was $100 in this case.
Okay, $100 for a month, 2 years.
No, for just for the option.
Just the one option.
Yeah.
So at least for a couple of years, you have. I have the opportunity.
It depends. It really.
Okay. That's your policy core. And I do have a few.
Chairman, I will. Before you do that, I just realized that we do not have a copy of the option to lease agreement, and
yes, we do.
according to the subpoena, unless it was provided voluntarily, the subpoena duces tecum did not show that, and that's why I was going to raise this question if the members had.
Mr. Chair, just for your info, this information is contained in the document submitted by the Office of the Attorney General dated August 28th of this year.
So clarified, thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. I was looking at DPL, the list, to see if we had subpoenaed them, and it did not indicate that we did. And so I was going to ask for a copy of it, but since we do have that information, I wanted, we can put that to rest. Maybe before we continue the line of questioning, something one of the legal counsels did yesterday for the benefit of the members to kind of streamline the process and to expedite it, if you will, was to kind of go through the timeline of what happened, and the legal counsel helped, and then the members by that time, what that counsel did was kind of ask questions of the witness, kind of what happened from the beginning, when did they first approach you, what did you know, what happened subsequently, did you have meetings and so forth. And then a lot of times by that time we didn't have to answer the question because it was already provided. Would you, Mike, like to kind of go along that route?
Sure. I mean, DPL's role in the options contract, there's really not a lot to tell. I mean, we basically reviewed a contract, discussed it, and had a meeting about it, and then it was approved, and it was signed. I mean, there's really not a long story to tell about what happened.
Okay, you had one meeting.
We had two meetings. Sorry. So we ended up getting the options contract from the Attorney General's office, and I reviewed it, and I had a meeting with Ray, Mr. Salas, and then later on, Gil Burnbridge, the chief of the civil division at the Attorney General's office, he came down, and then all three of us had a meeting together. I don't know if anybody else was there. Oh, yeah, Pete Idibus was there as well. And so that was the second meeting, and the result of that meeting was that the document ended up being signed.
Thank you. At least there's some information. I will go ahead and allow Representative Teptet to continue his question.
I'll close it with just a few more questions, Mr. Chairman. Thank you. And the reason why I was asking that is because of the information that's in front of me. In fact, I'm looking at, and the secretary, I mean, the council did, I'm sorry, the secretary did mention that he signed this lease agreement in August 3rd, option to lease, and I'm looking at the document that bears your signature, and the document that bears your signature, as you stated correctly, option to lease agreement, dated August 3rd between Public Land and Saipan Development LLC, and that's the reason why I was asking on what is the process to acquire this. And at the same time, I'm looking at documents that's dated March 27 of this year, and that was during the former Secretary Babautan. These are all just preliminary draft on land lease agreement. So you have dates dated March 27 on land lease agreement being worked out. These are all draft. It's not binding yet. And then you have an option dated August, option to lease agreement dated August, subsequently when the good secretary became the acting, or the acting secretary came into the picture, and that is dated August 3rd, as you mentioned. And at the same time, you also have other documents supporting this option to lease, signed, notarized, and signed by the two parties, one Public Land and one is Saipan LLC. Is that correct?
That is correct.
And one that is signed by the Attorney General and also notarized by Mary Woodworth is also dated August 3rd, 2012 of this year. But it is from the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, County of Montgomery. They kind of just slashed out the Commonwealth and wrote in the Pennsylvania. They also slashed out the Northern Mariana Islands and wrote in the County of Montgomery. And so that was the reason why I was asking the process of how to acquire this. So the notary public signed in August 3rd. With this change that seemed to come from the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, County of Montgomery. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I yield for now.
Thank you, Rep. Representative Guerrero.
Good afternoon, Mr. Salas. How are you?
Good morning, Congressman.
You had just explained to Representative Tepute about the option to lease, but I want just a little bit of clarification on that. An option to lease. If I were leasing a property, like in an option to lease, right? What can I do with that property?
If I may, nothing. It's just held for a future interest to be transferred, whether that's a lease interest or a fee simple interest. It's just being held. You, as a company or a person who wants the option, would just have the option. You wouldn't have any title interest in the land at all, so you wouldn't be able to really do anything with the land. It would just be held for until future time.
So I couldn't build anything, I couldn't do anything with it. It's just being held for perhaps a future contract that I'm currently negotiating with the CNOI government.
That's correct.
Okay, thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Rep. Representative Sablan.
Thank you, Chairman. Good morning, Secretary.
Morning,
Also,
Congressman.
just to quickly summarize this whole thing, when was DPL first approached on the idea of the option?
My answer is I don't know, Mr. Chairman.
There's no record in DPL in regards to when the office was first approached of the idea of the option to lease on this particular parcel of land.
Mr. Chairman, I became acting secretary on August 2nd, and I'm not aware if there was a previous Secretary Bavalta initiated this.
Okay, I respect that answer. And with that, can we request the secretary to provide the committee with that information? Can you go back to the office and?
If we have it, Congressman, I'm willing to provide the committee.
Okay, thank you. And so with you not knowing when DPA was first approached on the idea of the option to lease this particular parcel of land, I'm assuming that no one knows or you don't know who approached the department?
As far as I know, Mrs. Congressman, should be the Attorney General, Mr. Yu.
Members?
Yeah, that's correct.
And for the record, I think the council did state that earlier, that this kind of started when the Attorney General's office submitted a proposed option to lease to DPL. That's kind of what initiated the, I think that was on record already.
Chairman, and I understand, but I'm just curious that the AG's office is approached the government department on the option to lease on behalf of a private investor. Mr. Secretary, because you mentioned that the option to lease has a 2-year term. What happens if someone wants to lease the property within the 2 years? Someone else.
It's either we cancel this option to lease, or we just have to wait for the 2-year period.
So the department can unilaterally terminate the option to lease?
Not unilaterally, Mr. Chairman, but we just have to get an agreement with the company that we involve this option to lease.
And the reason I ask that is because if the department cannot terminate the option to lease unilaterally, we should be concerned that large parcel of land, and I don't want this to be a specific example, but a 32,000 square meter land being held or being made not available to other investors for $100 fee is quite concerning.
Congressman, the land, was sitting idle, and there's nothing.
I think that's besides the point. My point is that for $100, someone can tie up a 32,000 square meter parcel of land for 2 years.
Okay, so if you look at the option agreement on the very last paragraph of the first page, it does discuss that the power plant is really going to be used for the operation and construction of a shipyard. And the Secretary of DPL can make the choice to give an option to a company, the result of which would be the creation of 2,000 high-paying jobs in the Commonwealth. And to tie up land for 2 years for $100 is the land that hasn't been used for anything in the past couple of years.
The senators can go on and on. My point is, for $100 fee, we're tying up a 32,000 parcel of public land. Anyway, since you mentioned the shipyard, is there another option to lease for the current power plant site?
No.
So why are we mentioning the shipyard here?
It's in the option to lease agreement. It mentioned the shipyard.
It's mentioned in the option to lease.
If I may, it's under the purpose section of the option to lease. So the purpose of the option is for a power plant that would service the shipyard.
Okay, Secretary, one last question. When was the negotiation for the option to lease made? When was the final decision of the agreement made?
Well, the final decision was made on August 3rd when I signed the option to lease.
So who was present when the parties agreed to signing off on the option, on the lease agreement?
Gil, Mike, and Pete Itibus.
Who?
Pete Itibus.
And so the agreement was made on the 3rd, and the signature or the document was signed off on the 3rd.
We reviewed the option to lease in the morning with the two counsel along with Mr. Pidit Tibus, and I believe in the afternoon, we went over the document in the morning, and in the afternoon we signed it. I signed the document.
Who requested that the document be signed on that afternoon? Was there any request made for the option to lease made on that particular day, and by who?
There was never a request. I was handed over by Mr. Gil, what's his name? Burnbridge, one of the Assistant Attorney General.
So it was Assistant Attorney Gil Burnbridge that requested that the agreement be signed that afternoon or that day.
He didn't request the document be signed in the afternoon. He handed me the document in the afternoon. He came down to DPL's office, and that's where I signed the document.
You were handed that afternoon and you signed off on it on the afternoon. Is that normal?
If I may, we had a copy in the morning, and we had a meeting before our afternoon meeting, so it's not like he was immediately given a document and signed it. We had at least 2 meetings before it was signed.
Thank you. I recognize Representative Guerrero.
Hi. Mr. Salas. Just going back to the option to lease again, my first question. You guys would review every option to lease, right? Yeah. You would review it for any contracts that are in negotiation or things like that. Somebody just can't come up and tie up the land, right?
If I may. Yes, there was an investigation done by DPL as into whether or not we had any current leases on the public land, and if there were any current bids to lease that portion of public land, and if there were any plans to develop that land otherwise. And it turned out there were not. The land was just unused, and there were no plans that we found on the horizon for use of that particular plot of land.
And the company that was planning with the option that paid the $100, right? They had plans for the land.
Yes, under the option agreement, it's that's the power plant site, and under the purpose of the option agreement, the purpose of putting the power plant there was to develop the shipyard in that area.
Okay. Now, when these negotiations for the land first started, with the options and the from the first contract to the final signing, how long did that take?
As Representative Tebetub said earlier, that there were some documents that had previous Secretary Oscar Bavauda's signature on them. So, at least back until that time, but that was before my time at DPL, and it was before Ray became the acting secretary.
So how long would you say it was?
Probably.
2 weeks ago.
No. Acting secretary just gave me a year of 2006. So I don't know if that's what Mr. Tebetub had mentioned earlier as a year on some documents that he had.
not here asking Representative Tebutip, I'm asking you guys because you guys are representing that agency.
Right, but
Let me rephrase the question. Was it more than 1 year?
I really don't know. I just started in August, and if there were some draft lease agreements that go back to maybe the beginning of the year, then I mean that would be a safe bet that there were discussions around that time. So at least the beginning of the year.
You're saying when you started in August, right? When you started in August, it was already ongoing.
Of course, yeah.
Okay. All right. Okay, I'll take that. Thank you.
Are you finished, Representative Guerrero? Anyone else? Okay, I have a few. Mr. Secretary, and the legal counsel as well. I just want to kind of understand the timeline here. You did state that DPL had several meetings, I think 2 meetings with, I think it was the AG regarding this matter before you signed the option to lease agreement. Was it 2 meetings?
If I may.
Please.
Yeah, I received, I believe, like a PDF version of the option from Gil in the morning, and I had a meeting with Mr. Salas at that time, and we discussed it.
Do you recall the date, roughly?
It was, I believe it was on the 3rd in the morning.
Oh, okay. So you received the
That
Wikipedia
option. Or yeah, the
template, if you will.
Yeah, I just got it through email, I believe, and then I printed it out, and I had a meeting with Mr. Salas about that.
Okay.
And then later on in the afternoon, Gil requested a meeting, and Pete was there as well, Mr.
Okay.
Pete Idibus. And so there were 2 meetings on the same day.
On the same day. Okay, that's kind of when I wasn't sure if the meetings happened earlier or what, but so you had a meeting earlier in the day, in the morning, where Mr. Gil Burnbridge had sent you a template, if you will, of an option to lease form or document, and then I guess you had filled in what should be in there, and then reviewed it, and I think it was signed later on in the day with Mr. Salas and Mr. Pete Idibus present. That kind of leads me to believe that option to lease, is that a type of agreement that DPL has issued prior to that date? Is it something, a part of your, standard operating procedures? Has DPL ever issued option to lease agreements with any prior developer?
I personally can't speak to that because I've only been there a very short time. I believe the previous acting secretary was Pete Idibus. I'm not sure if he issued any or if Oscar Babauta before him. I just can't speak to that. I have no personal knowledge of that.
But because you did say that Mr. Gill was able to find an option to lease document through Wikipedia, that sort of implies that you don't have that form in the office as a standard type of agreement.
Oh no, if I can clarify, I didn't say anything about Wikipedia. I just said a PDF document. It's just like a Word document or just an electronic form of a document that I got via email. There's never any Wikipedia involved.
I see.
And as far as whether or not DPL has a form option agreement, maybe we do. I don't know. We didn't. We never needed a form option agreement since I've been there for the past couple of months. But I have no personal knowledge of whether or not I imagine that we do. I mean, it's a very common agreement to enter into before you proceed with land transactions, though. So I imagine that we would, but I have no personal knowledge.
Yes, I guess my question should be reworded or rephrased. Mr. Secretary, do you have any knowledge of any type of option to lease agreement that was ever executed by DPL during your, I don't recall how many years you've been in the office? Just from your recollection, do you recall?
I have no personal knowledge, but we should, I mean, real estate division should have this document.
Okay, fair enough. Thank you. And the other thing I can gather from the statements I've heard so far was that this document and this option to lease, to provide for an option to lease, was not generated by your office after consultation with the developer. So in other words, it wasn't that the developer came in and met with DPL and said, we have this project coming about, we want to explore the possibility of getting some kind of agreement and an option to lease. That wasn't the case. Based on my understanding of your statement so far, this was initiated by and the time you were made aware of this need to have an option to lease agreement came from the Attorney General's office. So that's what kind of made DPL aware that such an agreement was needed. Is that a fair statement?
Mr. Chairman, I don't know what kind of negotiation former Secretary Babauta or Mr. Pidit was had with these people.
So it could be that there was prior negotiations with STLLC. You just weren't privy to it because you were not the acting secretary at the time, correct?
That's correct.
But we do know that this option to lease agreement was transmitted to DPL by the Attorney General's office. Is that a fair statement? I think you already made that clear in your statement anyway.
If I may, yes, that is accurate. However, we don't know if the Attorney General's office originally got the option from us, previously. Like, we really don't know that information yet. I think that's something that you could ask Mr. Burnbridge.
Okay, I think we will. Thank you. I have no further questions. Any other members?
Chair, privilege.
Representative Guerrero.
No disrespect to the two over here, but they both seem very, very new to this position. Have we subpoenaed in Oscar Babauta and Mr. Pete Itibus? Apparently their names also follow suit from with this, and they could explain more, give more light on the issue.
Before you make a motion, we can discuss it further.
Yeah, that's why I wanted to.
Did you want to respond or discuss it further?
Mr. Chair, after listening to Rev. Guerrero, you're more than welcome to make that motion to issue a subpoena for Mr. Pete Itibus and Mr. Oscar Babauta.
Perhaps we may not need to issue a subpoena to Mr. Pete Itibus because he's in the chamber. Are there any objections from the members to ask Mr. Pete Itibus, even though he was not subpoenaed, if he voluntarily wishes to come forward and be able to answer any questions. Any objections to that?
I will object to that, Mr. Chairman. We do have the proper documents in front of us, and I think Mr. Salas, or I think Secretary Salas and Mr. Wood has been very upfront with the information that we would need relative to the article that we are looking at. And I'm going to repeat again that there were two options to lease, and one was dated in March 27 of this year under the former Secretary Oscar Babauta, and this latest one signed August 3rd, signed by the acting Secretary Salas. And the only difference are basically the date, and now we have, in addition to a witness or notarized notary signed by DPL's representatives and notary signed by Saipan Development LLC from the state of Pennsylvania. So I do object to having these former acting secretary of DPL the question on this. I think we're clear in this, and I'm comfortable with the way at least the presentations has been done relative to the article from the two gentlemen in front of us. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative. Before I recognize Representative Torres, I think it was I that posed the question that they were unable to ascertain, and I think what I was trying to determine was, one, whether the agreement was generated from DPL or from the Attorney General's office. They have answered that yes, they did get the document from the Attorney General's office, but they have no knowledge whether that document or the agreement that the Attorney General provided to them actually may have originated from DPL earlier. And so because they were not able to answer that, and we may have Mr. Itibus that can answer that, I don't know if, personally I feel we have an opportunity to put the question to rest. If Mr. Itibus may be allowed to answer the question and put it to rest. Representative Torres, did you have any comments? Go ahead.
Just so that I understand the option to lease, Mr. Secretary, there is a prior option to lease agreement on March 27, 2012, and the latest one is August 3rd. What is the difference between the two separate option to lease?
Congressman, I never see that March 27, no, I mean March 2007 document. I never see that document.
Because my question is why that the DPO and the company redo the whole option to lease 5 months later. I just wanted to understand what is the changes in the language, because these documents are in the hands of DPL, both, and the company, Saipan Development LLC.
Point of clarification, Mr. Chairman.
State your point.
I believe that Representative Torres was asking the question with regards to the two option to lease documents. I think that the Secretary had misinterpreted the date that you mentioned, and that date was March 27, 2012. It was not March 2007. Am I correct, Mr. Secretary?
I think for clarification's sake, you are correct, Representatives De La Cruz. I think what he stated was he's not aware of the March 27 document, agreement, and perhaps that's why he wasn't sure of the date.
Yes, he stated March 2007.
Exactly.
Whereas Representative Torres stated March 27, 2012.
Correct. And I think that was simply because the Secretary did state that he wasn't aware of the earlier agreement. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Thank you. So I think even the question posed by what do you call this, Representative Torres about the difference, I don't know if Mr. Secretary is in a position to answer that, being he was not aware of the earlier document. And we may have the former acting secretary that is present here with us today who may. So again, the question is, would the members like to request if Mr. Pirit Tubos can answer some questions to clarify the issues? Any objections?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, I object.
Okay. Objection is noted. I think are the members satisfied with the question so far and no longer wanna, because although your objection is noted, I asked the question and I am not satisfied because, and it's not your fault, Mr. Secretary, you cannot answer to something that you were not a party to. We have a difference of opinion. So, as we did with the prior, let me make it simple. Perhaps let me go on a short recess. Short recess.